All right, good evening. My name's Sam Lisbon from Team Learn to Win, and we're thrilled to share with you all of our progress we've made over the last 10 weeks, conducting interviews with 107 different folks and conducting 5 trips across the country. Now, before we dive into the full narrative of our entire journey, we wanted to set the stage by talking a little bit about pilot training in the U.S. Air Force and provide some context. First of all, we view pilot training in 3 distinct phases. Undergraduate pilot training, which takes a total novice like myself and makes them airworthy. Formal training units, which transfer that set of skills into a particular aircraft. And then operational squadrons, which also conduct training by means of a continuation training that keeps them updated on the material they need to know to stay proficient as pilots. But when we started the course, we didn't know any of this, and we didn't understand the structure at all. In fact, all we started with was a vague problem statement saying that pilot training hasn't changed in 40-odd years. And we had the professional experience with Learn to Win about education technology more generally. And so the first thing we did was we went out and talked to pilots. And we talked to pilots and instructors. And that led to 2 key takeaways in the first few weeks of the course. The first was that pilot training is antiquated. We heard a bevy of complaints from pilots across the board about the process. And also we heard frustrations from instructors. In fact, on both sides of this narrative, the instructors and the pilots seemed frustrated with the way that pilot training works. And there was a second component as well. It's incredibly complicated, and there's a deep series of external dependencies. Some of them we felt we were well suited to tackle based on our team experience, and some of them seemed outside of that domain, or there were other organizations working on some of these challenges as well. And so by week 2, we had pretty well narrowed down to the academics part of pilot training. And that's where we lost the script a little bit. We spent a lot of time trying to connect the content we had heard from pilots and instructors to actual real-world consequences without a lot of success, and we were doing a really poor job of defining the problem in concrete terms. And so what do you do when you're uncertain? This was our sort of progression of our solution. It's sort of an uncertain tech solution, but we didn't really have a clear MVP. We didn't really have a clear set of the problem, and so we went and looked at who else was solving this problem. And that's when we discovered Pilot Training Next. Pilot Training Next is a division of the Air Force. They're down in Austin, Texas. And they're working on taking the 13-month process of undergraduate pilot training and condensing that to 6 months by putting VR simulators in the classroom and in the bedrooms of their students. So we flew down to Texas to see what was what. After our visit to Texas, this is me in the VR simulator. We had a great opportunity to discuss with them, and this looked kind of like a pivot. We generated 3 new problem statements. We thought a lot about ways we could plug in with the existing innovator workforce. And this is how our progression sort of turned. From weeks 1 to 3, we had sort of stuck in the same domain as our sponsor. And weeks 4 to 5, we looked like we were moving towards Pilot Training Next. But we had some conversations with the teaching team and with our sponsor, who was incredibly helpful. And something didn't quite feel right. And so we decided to take what we had learned from Pilot Training Next and extrapolate 3 key conclusions that we thought would inform the future direction of our team. The first was that the innovations of Pilot Training Next are not actually tech-based. They revolve around persistent access to education material and the ability for students to consistently re-engage with the things they need to know. The second was that the largest impact on the U.S. Air Force will not be in undergraduate pilot training, which constitutes only a small proportion of a pilot's career, but rather in the formal training units and operational squadrons that follow. And finally, AR and VR technology adoption requires changes to academics. Even though it's a simulator change fundamentally, there need to be parallel efforts to rethink how the academics work in the United States Air Force. And so at the end of 4 to 5 weeks, another pivot was made away from undergraduate pilot training and more towards the operational squadrons. And with that, we decided to get out of the building again.
So as Sam mentioned, after 7 weeks, we finally got some solid direction. And then we really kicked this thing into overdrive and accelerated by getting out of the building, going to Beale Air Force Base first, and then going to Tinker Air Force Base to talk to the people that are actually doing this stuff. So the way we got to Beale Air Force Base, I remember I was on the phone with Colonel Noak, who's the head of the training squadron at Beale. And I asked him, what's the state of continuation training like there? And he said, there is no continuation training. This fundamentally isn't getting done. And he said, we continued the discussion, and he ended up saying, if you could do this in an app, you'd make a lot of people's eyes moist. And I said, moist with boredom or tears of joy? And he said, definitely tears of joy. This is something we haven't been able to get right for a long time, and you could really help us out. So that was on a Wednesday. The next day was Thursday. I canceled all my appointments, drove up to Beale Air Force Base at 5 a.m., and this is what I got. So I said, why isn't this getting done? And people said, well, we've got these CBTs, but they're not in our electronic flight bags, so nobody's really using them. And we've got these public, manuals that are over 1,000 pages and a whole library of these things. So where do you even start with that for continuation training? Like is somebody going to make a detailed lesson plan all on their own? That's just not happening. And so that was the bottom line that we got out of this trip, is that this approach of like, hey, here's the material, stay on top of it, it's not working. So I sat down with Colonel Noak, Colonel Bubar at Beale Air Force Base, and I said, okay, what should this look like? And they said, if you can make 3 to 5 minute micro-learning lessons that take that 1,000-page document and break it down into bite-sized little pieces, and then we can pass that out to people automatically on their phones through this app, that'd be phenomenal. So we said, okay, that's great. And then the second thing they said is, look, like we're already inundated with administrative training, right? We want training that enhances the core warfighting skills that people came to the Air Force to do. Administrative training is great, we get it, but like we came here to be warfighters, we want you to focus on that aspect of our training and make us better at doing our jobs and the fundamental reason we're wearing the uniform in the first place. So over to Sasha.
So we went then and built a lesson on the U2, and we can't show you what we built on the U2 because that material is not releasable. But I can give you a little bit of background information on how the platform works from an athletic standpoint. So there's essentially 3 sides to the platform. The first one is the player learning side, or what we envision as the pilot learning side, where players take interactive and engaging lessons on their phone in a similar way that Rosetta Stone took learning a language from a physical textbook, and athletes learn their playbooks on a physical textbook, and a lot of this training currently is done on very, very large PDFs. It makes it interactive, it makes it engaging, and it makes it, I think most importantly, accessible, and puts it on the phone where you can do it. On the instructor side, it looks very similar to a PowerPoint, where you've got on the one hand kind of a preview of what it looks like, and the other hand, a very simple dashboard where you can build the material very similar to a PowerPoint. And then on the coach's dashboard side and instructor dashboard side, you have information on here's what my players or pilots understand. So you can have real-time feedback on here's the knowledge gaps of what my pilots don't understand, so we can go correct that immediately and instantly. So we built a lesson for the U2 on that, and then Phil's going to tell you a little bit about the reactions.
Right, so we built a lesson out from the Dash 1 and the U2. We took it up to Beale Air Force Base, and people loved it. They said, this is really exciting. And we didn't just show it to Beale, we also showed it to AFWorks. This is the feedback we got from a retired 06 F-22 pilot. He said, I would have paid my own money to have this as an F-22 guy. So it's exciting for pilots. It's also exciting for instructors. We got a ton of feedback about how this could be used. And I thought this one here was great, where you had an instructor saying, like, man, we could use this, like, if somebody's in a sim and they mess up a procedure in a sim, we can automatically text you the lesson on the materials that got screwed up and reinforce that right off the bat. So once we got that feedback from Beale, we knew that this is where we were going to stay for the rest of the class. We said there's real value here. And then the question we had to answer after that is this a problem that's isolated to Beale, or is this more systemic throughout the Air Force? And so we booked a trip to Tinker on our drive back home from Beale Air Force Base. Just got back from there on Thursday. And this is what we found at Tinker. This is the CBT room at Tinker. The contractors that gave us a tour of the building let us take a panorama photo of this room. And as the contractors jokingly noted, when we went into the room, there's nobody there. Nobody using these CBTs. And so we said, like, why aren't these CBTs being used? And one of the senior officers who was there said, personally, I haven't been in the CBT room in a decade. So we're like, why is that? And the answer is, so the CBTs are actually resident off base at Tinker. They're not able to be put on a Windows machine. They're only in this one room. So that means if somebody wants to do a computer-based training, they have to stop what they're doing, walk to their car, drive 4 miles, 13 minutes, park the car, head up to the CBT room, initialize the training, which is a monotone narrator walking you through the 101 principles before you get to anything interesting, and then repeat that journey on the way home. And that barrier to the learning is really stopping people from using what is otherwise a very good and useful mechanism to get training information to pilots. So if that weren't enough, this is how the CBTs are graded. They're graded on a paper notebook that's in a 3-ring binder that lives at this off-base facility. So you do your computer-based training, and this is where your grade goes. Now, we could go on for a long time about all the functionality you lose with a paper-based gradebook, and maybe the thousands of hours that are spent hand recording these grades over time and what that costs. But But the thesis we came out at Tinker with was this: greater accessibility of training is going to lead to greater usage, which leads to greater learning. That was our fundamental thesis. That was the course in sum in one slide.
So ultimately, we're really, really excited about this. We can't say thank you enough to our sponsor and all of the people that we've had the pleasure of working with over the course of this term. We are taking this forward. All 4 of us will be doing this after the course, with 2 of us doing it full-time this summer. And there's essentially 2 paths we're pursuing. One is direct contracting effort. I intend to ask Palmer's advice on this afterwards, since we're also looking at the SBIR and some of those other avenues, but would love to talk with you further. And as we mentioned, there is a dual use potential here, so we already have great success in the sports industry.
I'm going to interrupt you just so everyone knows. I'm going to have to leave in the middle of this because I'm on the last flight that gets back into Orange County. Thanks, noise restrictions from Richmond.
Oh man, tough.
But I'm easy to get in touch.
Cool.
Your people can get us connected.
Thanks so much.
Like the receptionist or something.
Yeah, and for those of you who will be here at the reception, we'd love to talk to you if you can help with anything that we're looking at right now around the contracting advice. We also currently are raising a pre-seed round. We've already got 250,000 committed of that, but we've got another 125 we're looking to fill. So if you know people that might want to be part of that, we would love to talk to you. And if you want to check out the app itself, this is the demo. You can just download it in the App Store. But again, thank you so much to Inski, our sponsor. He has been tremendous. It has been an amazing experience working with him, and we would not be anywhere close to where we are without his support. So thank you all so much.
Hello, everyone. We're Team Common Ground.